Hey, what's up, class? Welcome back for another distance learning lesson. So we've been working on translating expressions. Specifically, we've been working on word problems and being able to take a phrase or a sentence and then translate that into a mathematical expression that has numbers and symbols and variables. So we've talked in the last lesson, I talked to you about the idea of translating. Many of you are bilingual. You're able to translate, able to go from English and you can translate in your mind to Spanish, or you can go vice versa. So we want to do the same thing in math. Math is a language. We want to be able to translate something that's written in English or something written in Spanish, and we want to be able to translate that into math language. So we're going to continue working on that today. You should have the notes uploaded. So I'm going to go ahead and flip over to my DocuCam and we will get started here. My notes are on my DocuCam today. Okay, so this lesson is called Writing Math Stories. We're going to be using this idea called pictorial representations. You've seen me do pictorial representations in some of the word problems that we've been working on in class in the warm-ups. I haven't specifically told you it's called pictorial representations, but you will probably recognize when I explain what that is. So our objective for today is we want to be able to translate English words, phrases, and sentences into mathematical representations, expressions, and equations. So the first main point that I want to start with is I want to just review what an algebraic expression is, or an algebra expression. So an algebra expression, it has numbers, it usually has variables, and it usually has some type of symbols without an equal sign. So an expression does not have an equal sign. It'll have some numbers, usually some variables and some symbols, but no equal sign. When we talk about an algebraic equation or an algebra equation, it's the same thing, but an equation has the equal sign, right? And that's why this word equation kind of looks like equal. Okay, so an equation will have numbers, variables, and symbols, but it will have the equal sign. Okay, so when we talk about using pictorial representations, what I'm talking about is you're going to take a word problem, and we want to represent the word problem by using what I call tiles and pictures. So sometimes you've seen me draw pictures, and other times you've seen me draw little boxes, little squares, and I call those tiles. Okay, so in this first section of your notes, we're going to draw a pictorial representation to match each story. And then after we draw the pictorial representation, then we want to write an algebraic expression to match the pictorial representation. Okay, so here we'll go through some problems together. Okay, so this first example here, number one, Mr. Mason gave his son an envelope of money. Okay, so you know I have two sons, I've talked about them. So I give one of my sons, we'll say my son Jonah, I give him an envelope of money. Later, I gave my son another $5. Okay, so Mr. Mason gave his son an envelope of money. Doesn't tell us how much was in the envelope, right? Doesn't tell us. Then it says later I gave him another $5 for doing his chores. So if I want to represent this in a pictorial representation, then I would do something like this. There's the envelope, right? We don't know how much is in it. And there's the $5. Okay? So there's the envelope. The amount is unknown. There's the $5. Now, if I want to translate this into algebra, this is not algebra, this is just a picture. So whenever we have an unknown, then we actually use a variable. And there would be the algebra expression, x plus 5. Okay, so we don't know how much is in there, so we're going to use the variable x. Okay, all right, let's try number two. On number two, it says, Mr. Mason gave his son some money. Okay, so I gave him some money, but it doesn't tell us how much. And then his son spent $10 on Legos. Okay, my boys are a little bit older now, but they used to love Legos and they'd spend their money on Legos. Okay, so let's see. I gave him some money. So we don't know how much is in the envelope. So an envelope of money. And then it says he spent. So the word spent, is that an add, subtract, multiply, or divide concept? And that would be a subtract. So he spent $10. Okay. So then the algebra would be x minus 10. X minus 10. Okay. All right. Let's try a few more. They're going to get a little bit more sophisticated as we go. All right. So here we go. Number 3. Mr. Mason gave his son some money for his birthday. So it doesn't tell us how much. That's our unknown. His son then doubled the money by doing his chores. Later, his son received $20 more from his grandparents. Okay, so we're going to go one at a time. So the first thing is it says that I gave some money to my son. Okay, so I gave him money, and so that would be right there. Okay. Then it says he doubled his money. That means whatever was here, he doubled it by doing his chores. So we want another envelope of money. Then his son, my son, received $20 from his grandparents. So plus 20. So I gave him some money, and then he decided to double it. I told him, I'll double your money if you do your chores. So he doubled his money, and then his grandparents gave him $20. So now we don't know what this is. So what do we do if we have an unknown amount? We use a variable. So x plus 20. And now if we want to simplify this, an x plus an x, that would turn out to be 2x plus 20. Okay, so what we're doing is we're taking a word problem. Now, there's no equal sign in here. These are just expressions. It doesn't tell us how much it equals. We'll get to that. Right now, we're just taking some sentences and we're translating, right? There's the word translating. We're translating it into mathematical expressions. Okay. All right, let's try number 4. Mr. Mason told his son he would triple the sum of his savings and the $20 he earned from his chores. Mr. Mason told his son he would triple the sum. Okay, sum, that's one of those VIP private party words that we've been talking about. So it's an adding private party, so we have to ask who's at the private party. So it says, Mr. Mason told his son he would triple the sum. Okay, so who's at the private party? What's going to get added? His savings and the $20 he earned from his chores. Okay, so we have a private party, and at that private party, we've got a certain amount of money. We don't know. We'll just call it X, and then plus 20. The sum of his savings, that was his savings. We don't know how much. And then plus $20 he got for his chores. Now, if it's being tripled, then we need 3 of those. Right? So that's being tripled. Now we can do a couple of different things. If it's being tripled, one way to think of tripled is times 3. So we could write it like this. We could do 3 times the sum. 3 times the sum. Because that's what it told us. Triple the sum. So 3 times the sum. So whatever this is and this. Now, you could have added these up and got 3x and added these up, and we could get 60. But we want to just triple this sum. Okay? All right, let me move on to the next page. I'm going to flip the page here. Okay, number 5. Mr. Mason gave each of his 3 children, so I have 2 sons and then we have our daughter. So I gave each of our 3 children the same amount of money. Again, we don't know how much that is. It's an unknown amount. The children then combined their money and took the entire family out for ice cream and spent $30. Okay, so I have 3 children. I gave them all the same amount of money. So I gave envelope number 1, envelope number 2, and envelope number 3. And then they took us out to dinner and they spent $30. So this is an unknown, this is an unknown, and this is an unknown. But I gave them all the same amount. Right here it tells us the same amount. So whatever variable I use here, I want that same variable and that same variable. If it said it was different amounts, then I might do like an X and a Y and a Z. But since it said it's the same amount, we want X plus X plus X. And then that turns out to be 3X. And then we bring our minus 30 down. 3X minus 30. Okay, now on number 6, you're going to have to do number 6 on your own. Okay, so this is worth 2 points. Okay, so I gave you a box. You could put a question mark there if you wanted. And here's another one, a question mark. And then plus 20. Now you need to write the story. It doesn't have to be about me. I'd rather not see Mr. Mason. I'd rather you write your story. But it's got to represent this. Okay? So we're kind of working backwards. I was giving you a story, and then we did this. Now what I want you to do is I want you to look at this and then write your story. Okay? So you can go ahead and do that. You can pause the video if you need to. All right, now the next part is kind of like what we just did here, what you were supposed to do. But now we're going to work in reverse. So now you're going to work in reverse. You will be given a pictorial representation, and you need to write the expression, and then there's some guidelines that you have to follow. Okay, so I'll do some of these with you. So we're going to work in reverse. Okay. All right, so on number 7 here, it says, write 2 phrases in words. So now we're not drawing pictures, we're going to actually write phrases in words, but we're not allowed to use. So without using, we can't use a variable. So when we write it, we can't say the variable X or something like that. And we also cannot actually use an actual number digit. So I don't want to actually see the number 5 or the number 3. Okay, so we can actually write numbers. Okay, so here is our pictorial representation. So if we can't use a variable, then there's another way to express this. This would be an unknown. We don't know what this is. Right? So there's another way to talk about this if we were going to write it in words. So we could say something like this. A number, right? Or you could say an amount. We don't know what it is. An unknown amount, or a number plus 4, right? A number plus 4. I'm not using an actual digit. I didn't write the number. I didn't put the actual digit 4. I used the word 4. Okay, so that's real simple. So a number plus 4. Now, you need to do number 2. You need to do a second phrase. Okay, so something like this, but you need to use different words. You can say an unknown amount. You can use the words a number, but you can't say plus 4. You've got to do something else. Okay, it's got to mean this, but you've got to write it in a different way. Okay, all right, let's try number 8. So on your work, you're going to have an answer down here to get full credit. Okay, number 8. Write 2 phrases in words, and then here again, without using the following items. So we can't use a variable, we can't use an actual number digit, and we cannot use the word minus. So we can't use the word minus. Okay, so this is what it looks like. Okay, so how are we going to do that? So this is an unknown amount. There is a minus symbol, but we can't use the actual word minus. So we're going to have to think about some other words that might mean this. Okay, so here's an example. We could say the difference, right? That the difference, that's a private party subtracting word. The difference between 40 there's the word, not the actual digits, between 40 and a number. The difference between 40 and a number. Okay, now you need to do number 2. You're going to have to come up with another way to write this. All right. Okay, all right, let me turn the page. Got a few more to do. Okay, number 9. Write 2 phrases in words without using the following items. So we can't use a variable again in our sentence. We can't use a variable. We cannot use an actual number digit, and we cannot use the word add. Cannot use the word add this time. Okay, so we have an unknown amount, we have an unknown amount, and we have another unknown amount. They're all the same, but we cannot use an actual variable. So one way to say it would be 3 times a number, right? Let's say this was the number 2, and this was 2, and this was 2, and this was 2. Well, 3 times 2 would be 6. 2 plus 2 plus 2. So 3 times a number. Okay, so now you have to figure out another way to communicate this, but you can't use the word add. You can use some other word that means add, but you can't use the actual word add. So you have to come up with a creative way to communicate that right there. All right. Number 10. Write 2 phrases in words without using the following items. We can't use a variable, we can't use an actual number digit, and we can't use the word add, and we also cannot use the word plus. So no add and no plus. This is what it looks like. Okay, so it does have a minus, but we have to figure out how we're going to deal with this right here. So it's an amount, and then the same amount, and then minus 25. Okay, so you could say the sum, right? That means add. I didn't use the word add. I didn't use the word plus. I used the word sum. The sum of a number and itself, right? So we're adding a number in itself, but I didn't use the word add. The sum of a number in itself minus 25. And then I didn't use the actual digits. I wrote the word out, 25. Okay, you need to do number 2. You got to come up with a second way to communicate that. All right, so in your last set of notes, I believe they were called writing mathematical expressions or translating mathematical expressions. I gave you a whole list. Those are the videos that the last video I did, I gave you a whole list of words. And you could go back and look at that list of words for what are words that mean add and plus and so forth. Okay. All right, just a couple more. Okay, number 10. Write 2 phrases in words without using the following items. You can't use a variable, and you cannot use an actual number digit. Okay, so on this one, a little different. Okay, so those of you that have worked with tiles before, if one tile is light and one tile is dark, what does that typically indicate? Typically indicates that this is a positive number and this is a negative number, right? And since they're the same size, these are probably opposites. So I said something like a number added to its opposite. And I didn't say you couldn't use the word add. So a number added to its opposite plus 5 more. Okay, now you need to come up with a second way to say that, but now you can't use the word add because I've already used that, and you also can't use the word plus. So you need to come up with a different way to communicate what you see here. Okay. All right, and then number 11, you create the number and pictorial representation, right? So you're going to create the little picture, and then you're going to write a story that goes with it. Okay, so You need to draw your picture, your pictorial representation, and then you're going to write the story. Okay? Now, the last page, I'm just going to have you copy these down. We're going to be working on writing your own word problems. And so on this last page, these are called story starters. So I'm going to give you some different ideas. So when I have you write these stories, there's kind of 4 kind of themes that are easy to work with. So everyone likes to use money, right? So if we were going to talk about like plus or positives, there's some positive ways that we could talk about money. So for example, if you started off your little word problem, these are like word problem story starters, you're not writing a story for language arts. So if you were talking about positives, you could say you earned, right? That would be a positive concept. You could say you received. That's a positive concept, right? You're gaining something, right? You found, right? You're walking home and you found a $20 bill, okay? So those are positives, okay? If we were talking about money and we wanted to do negatives, you're copying these down, by the way, in your notes, okay? If you wanted to do negatives, you could say you spent, right? That means that you would be subtracting, right? You spent money, you're subtracting from what you have. You gave away, right? You're a nice friend and you gave some money to your friends, or you gave some money to a homeless person, right? Or you lost. Maybe you're careless and you lost your money, okay? All right, so that would be money concepts. Another type of story starter that's easy to work with, or word problem starter, would be elevation or hiking. Okay, so if we were talking about positive, we could say you hiked up, right? You hiked up the trail. Your elevation went up. We could say you climbed up. You could say you ran up, right? You ran up the hill to get away from your friend. Okay, playing hide and seek and you ran away. You ran up. All right, now some negative concepts where we're subtracting would be you hiked down, right? You hiked up, here you hiked down. You fell down, right? Maybe you climbed up the tree and then you fell down. Or you climbed up the trail and you slipped and you fell down. Or you tumbled down, that'd be even worse, okay? So those are some story starters there. All right, and then we did the UO. I think we did. Oh, no, we didn't. Sorry, I had that covered up. You lost, and then we could also say you owe on money. So go back and fill that one in. You owe. All right, temperature. Temperature is another one that we can talk about positive and negatives. So if we're talking about a positive concept, we would say the temperature rose. Or we could say the temperature got hotter by, and then you could say, like today when I'm recording this, it's like 108 degrees outside, right? So the temperature got hotter by like 15 degrees today, okay? You could say the temperature went up. Temperature went up, all right? Or you could say the temperature increased. So these are all positive concepts when you're reading word problems or you're writing word problems. Okay, and then some negative concepts, some subtracting. You could say the temperature dropped, right? This evening, the temperature is going to drop, might drop 20 degrees. Okay. The temperature got colder, right? So if the temperature got colder, that means the temperature is dropping, right? It got colder. The temperature got hotter, it went up. Okay, the temperature fell, another way to say it. You could say the temperature decreased. Okay, so these are all subtraction or negative concepts. All right, okay, and then the last story starter would be altitude, flying in an airplane. Not sure how many of you have flown in an airplane. My 2 sons, they flew in an airplane just last year for the first time. So my one son was 14 and my other son had not quite turned 12. And it was their first time flying in an airplane. Okay, so I don't know if you've flown in an airplane. All right, so positives, you could say your plane climbed. So in altitude, we don't call it elevation, we call it altitude. You could say your plane ascended. You could say your plane rose. All right, so those are all positive concepts. And then negative concepts, you could say you descended, right? When the pilot comes on, if you've ever flown an airplane and you're getting close to your destination, the pilot will come on the microphone and he'll say, ladies and gentlemen, please return to your seats and put on your seat belts. We will be descending. So descending means going down. You fell. Okay, so you fell in altitude. Say there was a technical difficulty and the plane started falling quickly. All right, and then if that's the case, you might want to parachute out. So you parachuted down. That would be a negative concept also. All right, so those are story starters. You're going to need to have that copied down to get full points for this assignment, but you're also going to need to hold on to those because we are going to be working on writing word problems. So you're going to need to have that in the future. Okay? All right, I went a little long today. Go ahead and fill in, go back and do your number 2 phrases for all of those problems. And you just got to keep working at it. You got to kind of get in the groove of recognizing what these words mean. If we say you earned, you received, you found, that's a positive concept. You spent, you gave away, you lost, you owe, that's a negative concept. So you kind of just have to get comfortable and familiar with them. All right, keep hanging in there, keep working hard, and I will see you soon. Okay, we'll talk to you later.